Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Albums Ranked. Today we'll be having a look at the near perfect album catalog of another one of my favorite bands, King Diamond. Firstly though, I'd just like to say if you like my content, please throw me a like and hit the subscribe button for more hard rock and heavy metal content coming your way soon. Anyway, back to the show. Of course, King Diamond is well known for being one of the most unique and original vocalists and musicians in metal with his crazy, evil, and ear-piercing falsetto, and from his pioneering and amazing work with the legendary band Merciful Fate to his amazing run with his own band, of course, King Diamond. There are few artists that can really claim the same kind of amazing legacy in heavy metal that has not only inspired countless artists and even genres, but also continues to draw in new fans to this day. I actually first heard King Diamond back in the early 90s with the album The Eye. I was kind of perplexed at the time and unfortunately wasn't ready for that at the tender age of 11 years old. However, some years later, I would finally go back and get that album and Abigail, and that was it. I was hooked. Between the unique vocal delivery, the occult storytelling prowess of King himself, and the overall theatrics, which are so exciting, I found myself thoroughly entertained. However, it was the sheer power of the music itself that it was really all about. King's longtime partner in crime is the guitar maestro Andy LaRocque, who also happens to be one of my all-time favorite guitar players. And I mentioned that in my favorite guitar players video, which I did not that long ago, so go check that out as well. Andy and King really managed to write some of the most kicking heavy metal riffage ever committed to tape. On top of that, Andy's solos are always the epitome of class and skill in perfect harmony. King also almost always had the ability to hire other musicians into the band that just took everything to the next level. Guys like the drum monster Mickey D and guitar virtuosos like Pete Black and Mike Weed, for example. Anyway, I've always wanted to do a ranking video for King ever since I started this channel. But with the exception of the bottom few albums, I found it really hard to separate them and rank them because I love most of King Diamond's stuff. Anyway, I think I can live with what I've got here, so let's get stuck into it. So, coming in at the bottom at the 12th spot is 2002's Abigail II, The Revenge, the direct sequel to Abigail, and is the first album to feature guitarist Mike Weed, drummer Matt Thompson, and the first to feature bassist Hal Patino since The Eye. Overall, the album isn't terrible, and there are some standout moments, namely anytime Andy or Mike take a solo. However, I find the songs themselves to be very unmemorable and even boring at times. It's one of the few King Diamond albums I find difficult to get all the way through. Not awful, but compared to King Diamond's other material and at their best, it just doesn't come close. And it certainly didn't come close to recapturing the magic of Abigail, which I'm guessing was the point of this album in the first place. Anyway, next in the 11th spot, we have 1996's The Graveyard. Now, I know this is an album that generates a lot of debate, some saying it's King's worst, and others that it's criminally underrated. Personally, as you can see from its place on my list, I'm in the former camp. Here you have the lineup of Herb Simonson on second guitar, Chris Estes on bass, and Darren Anthony sitting at the kit. The same lineup as the previous album, The Spider's Lullaby. However, unlike on that album, The Graveyard again has the same issues that I have with Abigail II. The songs themselves, apart from maybe Black Hill Sanitarium, are pretty forgettable. Again, it's certainly not terrible, because no King Diamond is terrible or a bad album, but Besides the always stellar guitar work, which is of course present, the overall doominess of this album doesn't translate into one of their best. I will give King some credit though for themes, as you know, it really ain't easy writing about the horrors and evils of child molestation of all things. It's just a shame the music doesn't quite live up to the impact of the words. Anyway, coming into the 10th spot, we have 2000's House of God. Here, the lineup was Glenn Drover on the second axe, David Harbour on bass, and John Luke Hebert on the drums. So I would say there's several problems with House of God. First, the production feels pretty lifeless, and even the kick-ass riffs, and yes, it's King Diamond, so there are plenty of kick-ass riffs. The overall sound just feels really flat and seems to suck the life out of the record. Also, this lineup itself feels like it's kind of just going through the motions. I don't feel the raw power here that we get on other albums, even the ones below this one on the list. That being said, I think the songs are a bit better here though, and the subject matter is pretty unique and interesting as well. I probably like the title track, The Pact, and Help the most. And yeah, I still don't really think that anything here really sticks with me too much or rates next to any of King's classics. An overall cool album, but a bit flat and lifeless in spite of the cool story, I would say. Next, in the 9th spot, we have 1998's Voodoo. So this is the last album on the list that I find a bit subpar compared to the rest of the catalogue. Overall, I like the heavier, more aggressive production than on some of the others I've already mentioned. And again, the subject matter of voodoo hauntings in the Louisiana Bayou is also pretty cool. King certainly knows how to spin a good yarn, that's for sure. Anyway, here we had the same lineup as The Graveyard, but with John Luke Hebert on the kit. Another cool inclusion is the guitar solo from the late great Dimebag Darrell on the title track, which is definitely a standout moment on the album. Actually, Voodoo is probably one of my favorite songs on the album as well. The Lower House and The Secret are pretty cool, and there are plenty of cool riffs and great solos throughout. But again, this album just doesn't quite measure up to what preceded it. These bottom four albums I almost never go back to, and if I need a King fix, I don't really reach for any of them, really, and Voodoo only ranks a little higher because overall it sounds a bit more kicking than the others I've covered. Okay, from here on in, I really love every one of the albums and actually found it really hard to decide where to place things. So anyway, with that said, coming into the 8th spot is King Diamond's last album to date, 2007's Give Me Your Soul, Please. Now, this is another album that is pretty divisive among the fans, except in this case, I just don't really get it. Perhaps it's the production, which is sort of pretty sanitized and safe and stale, really. However, unlike House of God, I feel like on this one, King Diamond rediscovered their ability to write catchy and memorable songs. Here, the lineup included Mike Weed, Hal Patino, and Matt Thompson on the drums. The subject is also kind of weird and cool. A poor little brother and sister are brutally murdered by their abusive father, and when their souls sort of arrive for judgment at the pearly gates or wherever, somehow a mistake is made, like a clerical mistake in the, going to heaven. Anyway, the ones deciding their fate deem the boy to be a suicide and condemn him to an eternity in hell. So this prompts his sister, the girl, to return to Earth to find a replacement soul for her poor, condemned brother. Neverending Hill is a great opener with some super tasty guitar work. Black of Night is cool. Mirror Mirror has great melodic and haunting passages, and the chorus is really cool, very memorable. And the title track is so sinister and dark, and they even made a pretty cool video for that one. And The Floating Head is also a killer track with more fantastic King hooks. Again, of course, the album is loaded with killer guitar playing, which really is a mainstay of the whole catalogue. Also, it's worth mentioning that some have complained that King's voice sounds a bit weak. He was having health problems around this time. So, his voice sounds a little weak on this one. And, while it is more subdued and less falsetto-y, I actually really like his mid-range voice. So I'm actually quite happy to see him sort of sitting in that range here on this album. Flat and shitty production, but with a cool story and some really fantastic songs. Overall, a great album, and in my opinion, this is the underrated album. Well, this is the album that is way too underrated anyway, more than The Graveyard, I would say. Coming into the 7th spot, and I know some of you will hate me for this, but it's 1988's Them. The first installment to the 2-part epic tale of the house called Amon and the evil that dwells within and wreaks havoc upon the young king and his poor family. There are many people who would rate this album as number 1, and I get it, really. It's a fantastic album. It has my favorite King Diamond lineup as well, of guitar combo Pete Black with, of course, Andy, Hal Patino on bass, and of course the Thunder Horse Mickey D on drums. The standouts on this album are really Everest High with Welcome Home, The Killer, Invisible Guest, which is a great song, Mother's Getting Weaker, and Twilight Symphony probably being my favorites. The guitar playing is molten burning lava erupting all over your face, and even though the production is too thin, the playing of Mickey on the kit can't be denied. Definitely a standout on this album. King's vocal melodies are fantastic too. However, at times I find his use of falsetto on them a bit exhausting on the old ears. He shrieks his way through most of this album with very little of his awesome mid-range to offset it. Also, I feel like some of the albums above are a bit more all killer, no filler. Although that being said, I do love this album a lot. I did have a hard time placing it so low down the list, but I had to go with the heart and not the head, so there it is. A killer album full of some absolute legit classics, guitar firepower of the highest order, and some of Mickey D's finest work. So next, coming into the 6th spot, we have the debut album from 1986, The Killer, Fatal Portrait. So this, of course, was the album that followed the demise of the first incarnation of Merciful Fate, when Hank Sherman decided to part ways with the band, and part ways with King and the band. Hank had let me just rephrase that. Hank was keen to play some more, let's say, commercially viable stuff, and the rest of Fate really wanted no part in that. This, of course, led to the rest of the guys, minus Kim Ruz, wanting to start a new band. And since King Diamond's name was already well known from Merciful Fate, they decided to continue under this as their new name, and Fatal Portrait was the first offering. Many people call call it the next Merciful Fate record, and I can see why. There's definitely some similarities there. However, already there is a shift occurring stylistically. The Satan-themed lyrics sort of give way to more occult and horror narrative themes, and also the music had more of a focus on atmosphere and theatrics, as well as the inclusion of keyboards. So Fatal Portrait is half concept album, half individual songs, but the most important thing is the songs themselves are just so damn killer. Every track on this album just oozes cool, and even though the material is simpler and more old school sounding than anything that would follow, this album still holds some of King's all-time classics. The Candle is a killer opener. Caron and Halloween are both huge fan favorites, and the whole album just plain rips from top to bottom. It's one of King's perfect albums, and in my opinion, he has several of them, but this is one of them. So in the fifth spot is going to 1995's The Spider's Lullaby. I mentioned before that I thought Give Me Your Soul Please was the underrated album. Well, I think you could also make the case for Spider's Lullaby. With the same lineup as the Graveyard album, this beast just rips from top to bottom. Like the aforementioned Fatal Portrait, it also is only half a concept album, with the last 4 songs telling the story of a man with crippling arachnophobia. So he checks himself into a mental facility under the care of Dr. Eastman, who forces him to face his fears in a terrifying way and with tragic results. Of course, it's King, it has to be. Anyway, it's very cool stuff, but actually my favorite stuff would be the individual songs of the first half of the album. The opener, From the Other Side, is so cool. Kicks ass, that song. One of my favorite openers of any King album. Killer, the next song, is great. The Poltergeist and Moonlight, oh, those songs all rip. And they're my favorites on the album, and they're just so damn strong. The melodies are great, the production is heavy as 10-ton balls, and the playing is fantastic from Andy and the guys. This album at times could even rate high for me. I really absolutely love it. And I know a lot of people overlook this album as well, like especially fans of the 80s stuff. If you have missed Spider's Lullaby and you love those earlier albums, definitely check this one out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. So next in the fourth spot is another underrated gem, 2003's The Puppet Master. This album was a real return to form for the band after a few less than great albums that had preceded it. It's almost like they had sort of rediscovered their lost book of hooks or something, because this album is stacked from top to bottom with amazing riffs, blazing hot lead guitar shredding, and some of King's strongest vocal melodies ever, really. The story is totally original and unique and super fucked up as well. It tells the tale of a couple deep in love who go to see this incredible puppet show in Budapest. The woman goes alone to see it again one night and never returns. When King goes searching for his lost love, he traces her back to the puppet master's house and follows the master's wife as she goes and murders some poor homeless man. Bringing his corpse back to the house, King follows and is inevitably captured by the master and his wife, who perform a demonic ritual which strips King from his body and traps him in his eyes with eternal life. Yet those eyes have been placed into the body of one of the master's puppets. To make things worse, King then realizes in one of the other puppets is the eyes of his beloved. So now he knows what's happened to her. Things only get worse from there, and I won't give away the whole story. But anyway, it's truly original and eerie as hell and told to perfection in this amazing album. Again, this is one this one is sometimes my favorite of King stuff too. It's really an amazing album. It's criminally underrated and just pure perfection. If you haven't heard it, go and check it out immediately. It's fantastic, really. So here we go, top three time. Now, this one is probably most people's number one. And again, I couldn't fault anyone for that because it is amazing. 1987's all-time heavy metal classic, Abigail. So this was King's first attempt at a full concept album, and he really nailed it. After inheriting the LaFay family mansion, the young couple move in against the warnings of the Seven Horsemen. Jonathan is visited by the family ghost who tells him about the family history in the house, and that the ghost of the stillborn Abigail is now within his wife, Miriam, who he must now kill. Of course, the fun ensues from there. From top to bottom, this is pure perfection. Arrival, what a great album opener. Great riffs. A Mansion in Darkness, The Family Ghost, The Seventh Day of July 1777, Omens, The Possession, Abigail, The Black Horseman, Shrine, all electrifying stuff. Perfect album. This is the same lineup as Fatal Portrait, but with everything just leveled up and the album finding an epicness and timelessness that is really hard to beat. I could easily put this one in the top spot, but my heart likes two albums a little bit more. However, it's a true classic album that no true heavy metal fan should be without. So, number two, here we go. 1990's The Eye. Maybe because it's the first King Diamond album I ever heard, but this album really resonates with me. I love the melodies, the killer guitar playing, and the amazing narrative choice by King of using real historical figures from across the French Inquisition and connecting them all with the mythical eye necklace. Between the torturing of witches, the murder of abusive priests, and the ritual torture of children by drugged up nuns and Father Picard, all make for perfect King Diamond narrative fodder. As a big history nerd myself, I always appreciate when you should mute that. That's my obligatory speech fumble that I have in every video. Anyway, I always appreciate it when musicians bring history into the mix. It's right up my alley. Anyway, the lineup was the same as them, but by then Mikkey D had had enough of the proggy direction the music was going in and wanting to play more direct rock and metal tunes, eventually heading off to Motorhead and now handling the drum duties for Scorpions. So replacing Mikkey was Snowy Shaw, and while the drumming on The Eye isn't as killer as the Mikkey albums, I just love the songs here so much, and for me, it's another perfect King Diamond album. Really, really amazing stuff. So, of course, everyone knows by now what's coming into the first place spot. It's the amazing 1989 classic, Conspiracy. So, Conspiracy was lyrically the sequel to Them, and as much as I love the Them album, Conspiracy for me is far superior. The songs are stronger, the story itself is a bit more relatable and better fleshed out, and the production is much better too. This would be Mikkey D's last album with the band, as he had already quit but was convinced by Pete and Andy to come back in to finish the album, and I'm so glad he did because he just gave the band that extra power and cool factor, which I think they kind of miss going forward from here. That being said, they still produce some great albums. So, since this is the number one, let's go through the narrative track by track. After the events of Them, an adult king returns to the House of Amon to reclaim his rightful place as heir to the house in At the Gates. Fantastic album opener, one of my favorite King Diamond tracks, absolutely love it. Then, on Sleepless Nights, he makes a deal with Them, the unseen demonic antagonist from the previous album, to return control of the house to Them in exchange for the chance to see his now dead sister Missy again, as he believes that she can help answer some of his questions. Sleepless Nights has got to be probably my favorite King Diamond song. I absolutely love it. I love all the directions it goes in. Fierce guitar playing, the solos from Pete and Andy are just both legendary. And the melodies that King does with the vocals are so damn cool as well, and eerie and awesome. I love it.
You an eternal deal. You will attend to the graves. You'll give us the house back and keep in mind that we only come here at night. So make the deal under the starry night, and anyone belongs to their night. I feel the dawn coming my way. And as the sun breaks up the dawn, I can't hear the dance no more. There is no voices killing the
Anyway, next we get King, who's attending the sessions with therapist Dr. Landau, who he absolutely despises and distrusts, and he lies to get his own way and manipulate him. And Landau suggests letting King's mother visit the house of Amon, and King sort of reluctantly agrees. But I just love the vitriol, that in that song that King sort of spits at the doctor. It's just so cool. So that night, Missy appears to him in a vision, which is a visit from the dead, and warns him through a dream where he sees Landau marrying his mother. And that's the song The Wedding Dream, which is just awesome. I love how they merge the wedding march, the classic dun 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 dun, into like the doominess of that track. It just works so well, and I love it. So the next day, King's mother indeed arrives, accompanied by Dr. Landau. And despite King's protestations about the deal with them, they enter the house, and King is ambushed and sedated by his mother and the doctor. Amon belongs to them. Then they go to the local demented priest Samael and convince him that King is possessed by Satan, and on victimized, this is what that's all about, and they decide to dispose of him. On Let It Be Done, they put King in a coffin and they burn him. And, the album closes with King's promise to haunt them forever from the grave on cremation. My favorite tracks on this album, Sleepless Nights obviously is a huge standout. At the Graves, Victimized, The Wedding Dream, all amazing. But really, it's just the whole damn album is awesome. It's perfect. I love everything about this album, even the cheesy moments. And whenever I need a King Diamond fix, this is the one I reach for the most. Absolute classic masterpiece. Anyway, guys, that's it for King Diamond. How would you guys rate these albums? Do you agree with me, or do you want to throw me into the burning coffin with King after hearing that? Anyway, let me know in the comments your thoughts and what you think about this fantastic band and their amazing musical legacy. So guys, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Stay metal, and see you next time.